Have you ever walked into a room and noticed who wasn't trying to prove anything? The one person who didn't need to speak over others. Yet somehow, when they did speak, the entire room turned to listen. In a world that moves fast, talks loud, and constantly demands attention, there's something unforgettable about someone who doesn't chase the noise, but commands the space through silence, clarity, and self-control. We live in a culture where people confuse volume with value, where reacting quickly is mistaken for being in control, where oversharing is encouraged, and boundaries are seen as cold. But power, real power, doesn't always look like dominance. Sometimes it looks like discipline. It's not about being passive or emotionless. It's about knowing when to speak and when not to, when to step forward and when to step back, when to hold your ground and when to walk away. That is the art of restraint. That is the wisdom of the Stoics. And let's be honest, most people today aren't taught this. They're taught to post more, argue harder, be louder, respond instantly. But that's not strength, that's noise. And noise by its very nature fades. There's a deeper strength, the kind that stays with you long after someone has left the room. A presence built not on charisma or charm, but on clarity, not on domination, but on discipline. This isn't theoretical. This is practical, strategic, and above all, quiet. Think of Marcus Aurelius writing to himself in the stillness of the early morning, reminding his own soul, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Or Epictetus, once a slave, who taught that true freedom doesn't come from changing the world. It comes from changing how we meet it. These men weren't warriors in the traditional sense, but they were masters of internal warfare. And today, when most of our battles are silent, psychological, emotional, social, the same Stoic weapons still apply. This isn't about retreating from the world. It's about moving through it with more intention, more awareness, more power. Look around. The people who constantly explain themselves, who rush to defend every opinion, who respond to every jab, they may seem assertive on the surface, but deep down, they're trapped, caught in a loop of needing to be understood, liked, validated. But the ones who pause, who observe, who don't flinch at discomfort, they become unreadable. And what you can't read, you can't predict. What you can't predict, you can't control. That's where presence is forged, not in how much space you take up, but in how still you can remain while others lose their footing. And I've seen it in boardrooms, in family dinners, in moments where everything seemed to unravel, but one person, just one, chose not to react, chose to breathe instead of break, chose clarity over chaos. That person always sets the tone. That person always shifts the frame. So if you've ever felt like the world is too loud for your kind of strength, like you're being overlooked because you're not the most vocal, like you're underestimated because you refuse to chase the spotlight, this message is for you. Because there's another way to lead, a quieter way, a steadier way, one that doesn't burn you out, doesn't compromise your values, and doesn't ask you to become someone you're not. In the next few minutes, I'll walk you through 7 silent principles of power, rooted in Stoic wisdom, sharpened by modern life. These are not tactics to manipulate people. These are disciplines to protect your energy, increase your presence, and anchor you in who you truly are, especially when the world tries to pull you in every direction. So take a breath, let the noise fade for a moment, and listen closely. Because the truth is, you don't need to fight for power. You just need to stop giving it away. Principle 1. Be strategically misunderstood. Most people spend their lives trying to be understood. They explain, they justify, they overshare, hoping that the more others know, the more they'll be respected. But the truth is, what's fully known is easily controlled. What's easily read is easily outmaneuvered. And that's where silence and mystery become your greatest advantage. Let me explain. There was a man I once worked with. Name was Carter. Soft-spoken, sharp. During meetings, while others scrambled to voice opinions, Carter often said just one thing. One carefully chosen phrase. Sometimes it was so vague, no one quite knew what he meant. But instead of looking weak, it made people pause. His colleagues would lean in, whisper after the meeting, "Did you catch what Carter said?" They would spend hours unpacking it, second-guessing, debating, and in doing so they revealed their own thoughts, insecurities, and blind spots, while Carter said almost nothing else. See, Carter didn't need to be understood. He needed to remain effective, and that meant not putting all his cards on the table. Most people think power comes from being articulate and clear at all times. And yes, clarity does have its place. But when used constantly, it makes you predictable. And predictability is vulnerability. If people can always anticipate how you'll react, they can steer you, manipulate you without you even noticing. But when you're strategically misunderstood, you're untouchable. It doesn't mean being deceptive. It doesn't mean lying. It means saying just enough and holding the rest. Letting people may assume, letting them underestimate you, even dismiss you, if it serves your positioning. The Stoics understood this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." In other words, don't mirror aggression. Don't match the noise. Don't react. Remain still. Remain unreadable. It's tempting to want to correct people's perceptions of us, but the moment you start chasing understanding, you've already given your power away. And in many cases, what people assume about you says more about them than it does about you. I remember a situation with one of my clients, Naomi, a young executive who had just joined a company full of dominant personalities. Instead of proving herself in every meeting, she played a different game. She listened, spoke less, and when she did, she sometimes allowed her ideas to be partially misunderstood, on purpose. The result? Others ran with the wrong interpretation, exposing flawed thinking. Naomi waited. Then, at just the right moment, she clarified, corrected, and redirected the group with precision. Her restraint became her leverage. You don't need to compete for airtime to influence a room. You don't need to win every interaction. Sometimes letting someone else think they've figured you out is the best way to remain in control. Because people guard against threats, but they don't guard against what they think they already understand, especially if they think you're harmless, slow, or naive. That illusion is your shield. While they relax, you observe. You study their habits, their ego, their tells, and when it matters, you strike. Not with volume, not with drama, but with the weight of timing and quiet precision. It's not about being manipulative. It's about being intentional. This is a discipline, not a performance. You don't need everyone to understand you. You need to be aligned with your purpose and protect your energy from unnecessary exposure. So next time you're tempted to explain yourself, pause. Ask, who does this explanation serve? Does it truly create clarity, or just open more doors for judgment, distortion, or control. The Stoic path is not about being invisible. It's about being unreadable by choice. And in a world that rewards noise and overexposure, your silence, your restraint, your strategic ambiguity becomes rare. And what is rare is valuable. You don't need to be fully understood. You just need to be remembered on your own terms. Principle 2. Master emotional stillness. You can tell a lot about a person by what it takes to break their calm. Most people don't realize they're giving their power away until it's already too late. They think raising their voice shows strength. They think quick comebacks show intelligence. They think making someone flinch is a win. But more often than not, the one who reacts first loses first. I remember watching a scene unfold in a coffee shop last year. A man named Julian, one of the baristas, was dealing with a customer who was clearly having a bad day. She insulted him, personally, loudly, and with a smug grin like she expected him to snap. But Julian didn't raise his voice. He didn't explain or defend himself. He just smiled politely, nodded, and said, "I understand you're upset. I'll step away for a moment and let someone else assist you." The customer stood there stunned. The room had been waiting for a fight, but there was no fight to witness. Julian walked away calm, and the energy in the room shifted. 10 minutes later, that same customer asked to speak with him again, not to complain, but to apologize. That's what emotional stillness does. It disarms chaos without lifting a finger. The Stoics knew this well. Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. The moment you let anger, insult, or provocation steer your behavior, you're no longer in charge. You've handed the keys to your inner world to someone else, and in that moment, they own you. We live in a world that celebrates emotional outbursts. Social media rewards drama. Reality TV thrives on overreaction. But in real life, in leadership, in conflict, in relationships, the one who stays composed always holds the upper hand. Don't mistake that for weakness. Stillness isn't silence. It's strategy. It's knowing that you're not obligated to respond to every trigger, that not every opinion deserves a reaction, that anger, if left unchecked, almost always works against you. Think about the last time someone pushed your buttons. Maybe it was a snide comment from a coworker. Maybe a family member brought up something they knew would hurt you. How did you respond? Did you defend yourself instantly? Did you raise your voice? Did it give you peace or just make you feel more drained? The Stoic doesn't rush to defend their ego. They don't react to every spark. They observe, they pause, and when they do speak, it's deliberate, measured, impossible to ignore. I once mentored a young woman named Lila, who had just been promoted to lead a team twice her age. Early on, a senior colleague tried to rattle her during a meeting, publicly questioning her competence. Lila didn't flinch. She simply said, "I hear your concern. Let's revisit the data together after the meeting." Her voice was calm, her face unreadable. That moment, it shifted the dynamic forever, because instead of playing defense, she stayed grounded in her values. Emotional stillness isn't about suppressing what you feel. It's about mastering when and how you express it. When you train yourself to respond instead of react, you become the anchor in the storm. Not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. And here's the deeper truth. When people can't predict your reactions, they can't control you. Your stillness creates uncertainty, not about who you are, but about what you'll do next. And that keeps you powerful. So next time someone tries to pull you into their chaos, pause. Don't flinch. Don't explain. Let your silence speak first. Let your presence set the tone, because the louder they get, the more they reveal, and the quieter you remain, the more you command. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Every time you choose calm over chaos, you reinforce that truth. And over time, it becomes your armor. Not because you're cold, but because you've decided that your peace is not up for negotiation. That's the heart of emotional mastery. It's not loud, it's not flashy, but it's unforgettable. Principle 3. Turn absence into strength. We've all been conditioned to think presence equals power. Be everywhere. Say more. Show up constantly. Be loud or be forgotten. But in truth, the things we value most, the people we respect most, aren't the ones always in front of us. They're the ones who choose when and where to appear. And when they do, they make it count. There's a reason diamonds are more valuable than gravel. Scarcity creates weight. I learned this lesson not in a book, but in a room full of people trying to be noticed. Years ago, I was part of a mastermind circle, ambitious minds gathering every month to share insights. There was one man, Thomas, who hardly ever showed up. When he did, he barely said a word for the first 30 minutes. But when he finally spoke, people stopped writing just to listen. His thoughts weren't louder, they weren't longer, but they landed with force. Because he didn't speak to fill time. He spoke with intent. People paid more attention to Thomas in 5 minutes than they did to others who spoke the entire session. Why did I? Because he wasn't always available. His words weren't diluted by overexposure. His presence was deliberate, not routine. And that's what absence does. It sharpens presence. We're taught to fear being forgotten. That if we're not constantly posting, replying, attending, engaging, we'll disappear. But that fear keeps us visible and forgettable. The Stoics saw things differently. They weren't obsessed with visibility. They were obsessed with alignment. Epictetus said, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Meaning, don't chase appearances. Chase truth, and if that means stepping back to protect your focus, your energy, your values, do it. Because when your presence is constant, it becomes ordinary. But when you're strategically scarce, people notice. They feel your absence. They wonder about your return. You become part of their mental space without saying a word. This principle applies everywhere, at work, in friendships, even in family dynamics. I once coached a client, Rebecca, who was overwhelmed in her team. She was answering every email within minutes, staying late to join every call, always saying yes. She thought it made her reliable. It actually made her invisible. Her contributions were expected, not valued. So we tried something simple. For 2 weeks, she delayed her replies by an hour. She skipped the optional meetings. She stopped volunteering first. And something strange happened. People started asking her opinion more. When she did speak up, they paid closer attention. Her space became respected, not because she demanded it, but because she stopped giving it away. Absence isn't about playing games. It's about understanding energy and perception. If you're always in the room, no one misses you. But if you leave strategically, physically, digitally, or emotionally, your return becomes meaningful. Even in relationships, this principle holds power. When you no longer show up just to prove your loyalty, when you stop over-explaining, when you stop answering every hey within seconds, people begin to feel the space you once filled. And in that space, they remember your worth. Absence speaks, but it only speaks when it's chosen, not when it's forced, not when it's sulking, not when it's done for manipulation. Intentional absence is an act of leadership. It says, my time is valuable. My attention is not on tap. I move with purpose. And here's the paradox. When people realize you don't need to be seen, they start to see you more clearly. Your presence begins to feel like a privilege, not an expectation. And when you return, your words carry more gravity. Not because you changed, but because you stopped trying to be everywhere. So ask yourself, where in your life are you overexposed? Where has your constant presence made you predictable? What would happen if you step back, not to disappear, but to sharpen your edge? You don't need to vanish. You just need to stop flooding the room. Let others scramble for attention. You stay quiet. You stay focused. You reappear on your own terms. Because in a noisy world, it's not the loudest voice that commands respect. It's the one that knows when to speak and when to step away. Principle 4, lead through reflection. Most people think leadership means talking more, being louder, giving instructions, taking charge. But the quietest leaders I've met, the ones who leave the deepest mark, rarely lead through force. They lead through presence, through reflection, through the subtle power of emotional alignment. Let me tell you about Aaron. He runs a design agency in New York, and he's not the typical high-energy executive you might expect. In fact, new clients often underestimate him at first. He listens more than he speaks. He asks questions slowly. He's calm, almost too calm. But something happens in meetings with Aaron. You start mirroring him. If you come in frantic, you find yourself slowing down. If your words are sharp, his tone softens yours. And without realizing it, you're not just hearing him, you're following him. That's the art of mirroring. And no, it's not manipulation. It's a deeper form of leadership. One based on emotional intelligence and self-control. Instead of pushing people, you invite them into your rhythm. You create a space where they feel understood, and when someone feels understood, they're more open, more receptive, more willing to move with you. The Stoics didn't talk about mirroring in modern terms, but the philosophy runs deep in their teachings. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." That begins by observing carefully, noticing where someone's energy is coming from, then adjusting not to please them, but to create alignment. I've seen this play out in tense negotiations. Once I coached a client named Elise, who was preparing for a high-stakes business deal. The opposing team came in hot, talking fast, pushing terms, posturing with confidence. Most people would respond with equal intensity, but Elise didn't. She matched them briefly, then gradually slowed her speech, paused more, lowered her tone. Within minutes, the energy in the room began to shift. The other side started mirroring her rhythm, subconsciously, and by the end of that meeting, they were following her pace. She didn't win the deal by overpowering them. She won it by grounding them. That's what reflective leadership does. It doesn't meet chaos with more chaos. It creates a mirror, and in that mirror, people see themselves more clearly. You might already use this without realizing. When a friend is upset and you lower your voice to help them calm down, or when someone's excited and you match their energy to celebrate with them. But when you do it consciously, with intention, it becomes a powerful tool. Not to dominate, but to lead. There's another layer to this. Reflection doesn't just build trust, it disarms ego. because you're not trying to win. You're not trying to prove anything. You're simply present. And in a world full of noise, that presence is magnetic. So how do you apply this? Next time you walk into a conversation, pause, observe. Ask yourself, what's the rhythm here? Fast, slow, nervous, aggressive? Then meet it briefly and shift. If they're speaking quickly, slow down just a bit. If they're uptight, relax your body language. If their voice is rising, drop yours slightly, not to copy, but to steady the moment. This isn't performance. It's leadership through regulation. And it works. Not because you're in control of them, but because you're in control of yourself. The truth is, people don't remember most of what you say, but they do remember how you made them feel. And if you become someone who creates calm, someone who reflects instead of reacts, they'll start following your lead without even knowing why. This is influence at its quietest, but also at its most effective. So the next time you want to lead, not with pressure, not with position, but with presence. Remember, you don't have to push people. You just have to meet them and then show them a steadier way forward. Because real leaders don't chase the spotlight. They guide the room by grounding the energy. And once you learn to master the rhythm of others, you begin to shape the flow of everything. Principle 5, walk away with clarity. There's a quiet kind of strength most people never learn. It doesn't show up in arguments. It doesn't announce itself with drama. It doesn't need applause or explanation. It simply walks away when it's time. Because real power knows when to exit. I once met a man named Victor, CEO of a mid-sized firm in tech. Smart, respected, and calm under pressure. He had invested months negotiating a joint venture with another company. Everyone thought the deal was locked in. But one morning, after a final meeting that didn't sit right with him, he pulled the plug. No long speech, no drama, just a quiet note to his team. The deal no longer aligns with our principles. We're moving on. People were shocked. Some questioned the decision. Others panicked. But 3 months later, that partnership collapsed on its own, driven by ego and chaos on the other side. And the very same people who doubted Victor, they came back asking how he saw it coming. But Victor didn't see it in the way people think. He didn't wait for disaster to strike. He just didn't let hope blind his clarity. That's what walking away with purpose looks like. In today's world, we're taught to cling, to fix, to force, to fight for everything. But not everything is meant to be held on to. People stay in draining conversations just to avoid looking weak. They stay in roles that don't respect them because walking away feels like failure. They stay in relationships that damage their spirit because they confuse endurance with loyalty. But the Stoics taught the opposite. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, if it's not right, don't do it. If it's not true, don't say it. It's not about pride. It's about alignment. It's about having the courage to say, this is no longer for me. And here's the truth most won't say out loud. You don't owe anyone a performance on your way out. You don't have to argue, explain, or justify. Your absence will say enough. I've been in rooms where the loudest person won the moment, and I've been in others where the quietest person, who stood up, walked away, and never came back, won the war. Leaving isn't giving up. Leaving when done with clarity is choosing your peace over your pride. Let me ask you this. Where in your life are you staying just to be seen as strong? What would shift if you gave yourself permission to leave, not in anger, not in fear, but in calm understanding that your values no longer match the space you're in? I once spoke with a woman named Clara who had been in a leadership role for 5 years. She was respected, well paid, but exhausted. The company culture had changed. The mission no longer resonated. Still, she hesitated. What will they think if I quit now? She asked. So I asked her, what will you become if you stay? 2 weeks later, she gave notice. No bitterness, no explanation, just gratitude and clarity. She didn't vanish, she evolved. And today she leads her own consulting group, serving the kind of clients she once dreamed of. Not because she fought harder, but because she stopped fighting the wrong battle. That's what walking away looks like when it's done right. It doesn't slam the door. It closes it with purpose, and those left behind, they feel it. They may not understand it, but they respect it, even if they never say it out loud. So remember, you don't have to prove your strength by staying. Sometimes your greatest act of courage is leaving with your dignity intact. Not every hill is worth dying on. Not every invitation to argue needs a reply. And not every space that once fit you is meant to hold your future. So when the moment comes and you know deep down it's time to go, don't wait for permission. Don't wait for things to collapse. Just leave with your peace, your clarity, and your standards. Because true power doesn't always say goodbye. Sometimes it just stops showing up. Principle 6. Let silence lead. Silence makes people uncomfortable. We live in a world addicted to noise, constant updates, quick replies, loud opinions. Most people can't sit through a 5-second pause without reaching for their phone, cracking a joke, or filling the space with something, anything to avoid the stillness. But here's the paradox. The person who is most comfortable with silence often holds the most power in the room. Think about it. When someone falls quiet in a heated conversation, people get uneasy. They start guessing. Are they angry, calm, calculating? That uncertainty forces others to reveal more than they planned, just to fill the void. That's the power of deliberate silence. It's not passive, it's not weak, it's strategic presence. I remember a situation a few years ago involving a woman named Leah, an HR director I worked with during a corporate investigation. Tensions were high, accusations were flying. One of the senior staff, desperate to prove his innocence, spoke nonstop in the meeting, listing facts, timelines, and excuses. Leah, on the other hand, said almost nothing. She just listened, took notes, made eye contact. She didn't interrupt, didn't frown, didn't smile. Her silence wasn't emptiness, it was weight. After 15 minutes, the man started contradicting himself, rambling, getting emotional. Eventually, he blurted out a detail no one had even asked about, one that turned out to be critical. And all Leah did was raise one eyebrow. That moment shifted everything. Because when you hold your silence like a blade, you don't have to swing it. People swing for themselves. The Stoics knew this truth long before it became a corporate tactic. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are disturbed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." Silence isn't just the absence of sound, it's the presence of control, emotional, psychological, and often social. In conversations, silence works as contrast. The less you speak, the more each word matters. The quieter your presence, the deeper it lands. When people can't read you, they overcompensate by speaking more, revealing more, and giving you more information than they plan to. I once coached a man named Malik. an executive preparing for a high-stakes salary negotiation. He asked me, should I prepare a strong opening statement? I said no. I told him to ask one clear question: what budget are you working with? And then say nothing. It felt unnatural to him. But when the meeting happened, that silence made the other side so uncomfortable. They talked themselves into offering more than he'd expected, without him ever needing to push. Silence disrupts patterns. In a world where people expect immediate feedback, constant validation, or quick resistance, your stillness creates uncertainty. That uncertainty gives you space, and in that space, people reveal their motives. It's especially powerful in conflict. When someone tries to provoke you, whether it's a sarcastic jab or a public challenge, the reflex is to snap back. But if you just pause, breathe, look at them, and say nothing, they start to stumble, because silence forces them to confront the weight of their own words. And here's the deeper truth: when you're not constantly explaining yourself, defending yourself, or filling every moment with words, you become rare. And what is rare becomes valuable. This doesn't mean you become aloof or emotionally distant. It means you use your voice like a scalpel, not a hammer. You speak when it serves your purpose, not your impulse. And when you do, people listen. So let me ask you, when was the last time you let silence do the talking? When was the last time you allowed someone else to sit in the discomfort they created without rushing in to soften it? Because sometimes your calm is the challenge, and your silence is the answer. The Stoics didn't preach loudness. They practiced presence, and in today's world, where everyone wants to be heard, the one who speaks last, or not at all, often shapes the conversation the most. So don't be afraid of silence. Let it lead. Because in the stillness, people start to hear what matters. Principle 7. Move like you have options. There's a certain kind of person who never begs. They never rush, never over-explain, never chase, and yet doors open for them. People listen to them. Respect follows them. Not because they shout, but because they move. Like they have options. Because they do. You've felt this before, maybe in a negotiation, a job interview, a relationship dynamic. That invisible shift in power when one person isn't desperate, when they don't need the outcome. They're interested but detached, open but not attached. And suddenly, everyone leans in just a little more. It's not arrogance, it's posture. And it's one of the quietest forms of leverage a person can carry. Let me tell you about someone I once worked with. His name was Darren. Brilliant designer, quiet guy, didn't say much, but when he spoke, people listened. He was interviewing for a new role, and the company loved him. During the final interview, the hiring manager asked, "Are you ready to accept if we send you an offer today?" Darren smiled, paused, and said, "I'm very interested in this role, but I'm also exploring a few options that align with the impact I want to make." He didn't say it to play hardball. He said it because it was true, and because he wasn't afraid of losing the opportunity, he moved with calm clarity. By the next day, they came back with a higher offer, without him asking for it. Because people can feel when you're not chasing them. They sense when your validation doesn't come from being chosen, but from choosing well. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus once wrote, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. When you're not ruled by fear or scarcity, you walk differently. You speak differently. You send a signal, one that says, I am whole, I am grounded, I have options. And people respond to that. But let's be real, most people don't move like that. They're too busy trying to be picked, trying to be liked. They flood inboxes with follow-ups. They bend their standards to fit someone else's approval. They overstay in roles, in friendships, in environments where their worth is constantly questioned. Why? Because they've forgotten they have choices. But you do. And the moment you start moving like it, you stop negotiating from weakness. You stop needing to be seen. You start choosing where you want to be seen. I once spoke with a woman named Monica. She was in talks to partner with a major brand. When they started asking her to cut her rates for exposure, she didn't argue. She just said, "I appreciate the conversation, but this no longer fits the way I operate." She left the table, calm, direct, no drama. 2 weeks later, they came back with better terms. That's the thing. When you act like you have options, people treat you like you do. Not because you're playing games, but because you've done the internal work to realize your value isn't on the table. It walks with you. So ask yourself, where have you been negotiating from fear? Where have you been staying too long, hoping to be chosen instead of choosing? You don't need to bluff. You don't need to be cold. You just need to walk into every room like you belong there, but are perfectly willing to walk out. Because people respect what isn't desperate. They're drawn to what isn't available to everyone, and they lean toward what doesn't need them. That's not pride, that's clarity. So the next time you're faced with a decision, a deal, a dynamic, a demand, ask yourself, am I acting like I have options? Or am I acting like this is the only shot I've got? Because how you carry yourself in that moment speaks louder than anything you could say. Move like you have options, and eventually you won't have to move at all. The world will start moving around you. True power doesn't come from being the loudest person in the room. It doesn't come from having the last word, or showing up everywhere, or proving yourself over and over again. Real strength comes from the kind of discipline most people never see. The kind that doesn't demand attention, but commands it. The kind that doesn't shout, but resonates. The kind that doesn't react, but responds with clarity. Because when you master restraint, when you know when to speak, when to walk away, and when to remain silent, you stop being easy to manipulate. You stop being predictable. You stop being available to everything and start becoming respected for something. We live in a world obsessed with presence. Be seen, be loud, be constant. But the modern Stoic understands the deeper truth. Not everything that's visible is valuable, and not everything that's loud is worth following. So let's take a moment to remember the power in the quiet choices. When you let others misread you, not out of fear, but out of intention, you hold the advantage. When you remain calm while others unravel, you keep the frame. When you disappear with purpose, you sharpen your presence. When you reflect instead of dominate, you influence the room without having to force it. When you walk away without fanfare, you protect your energy and earn long-term respect. When you speak only when needed, your words cut deeper, last longer. And when you move like someone who has options, people start treating you like you're one. That's not a tactic, that's a standard. That's the posture of someone who's done the inner work, someone who leads themselves first. I've met a lot of people who chase influence, but the ones who keep it, they're the ones who don't need it to define them. They know who they are. They don't need to control the noise around them because they have already mastered the silence within. And that's what these 7 Stoic principles are really about. They're not just philosophies, they're disciplines, not just strategies to outmaneuver others, but frameworks to protect your peace in a world that constantly pulls you off center. Because the moment you stop reacting to everything, the moment you stop explaining yourself to everyone, the moment you stop showing up just to be seen, is the moment you become unshakable. So if any part of you felt called by this message, if something in your spirit felt the quiet shift, then maybe you've already begun the journey. Maybe you're already stepping into that version of you that doesn't flinch, that doesn't chase, that doesn't beg to be chosen. Maybe you're ready to stop proving and start embodying, because the most powerful presence in any space is the one that doesn't need to be validated by it. You don't need the spotlight to make an impact. You just need to hold your position long enough for the noise to pass. So here's your reminder. You don't have to yell to be heard. You don't have to fight for attention. You don't have to be seen everywhere to be respected everywhere. You just need to master the few things most people ignore: strategic silence, emotional discipline, the wisdom to walk away, and the confidence to move like someone with choices. That's what it means to walk the Stoic path, quietly but deliberately. And that's who you become when you decide. You no longer need the world's permission to be powerful. You just need to return to your own center every day and lead from there. If this spoke to you, take a moment to breathe it in. Let it settle into your system. And if you're ready to keep sharpening this edge, subscribe, share this with someone who needs it, and drop a comment below. I choose clarity over noise, because the world doesn't need more performers. It needs presence. It needs poise. It needs people like you, people who move, not to be seen, but because they know exactly where they're going.